All right, welcome back, everyone, to Buying Local. I'm your host, Mike Nelson, Five Towers Media. Thanks for listening, everybody. Excited today to be joined by Phil. My listeners know because I say it every show, but I always mess up everyone's name. So I'm going to attempt it, though.
That's good, Mike. Come on. You got this.
I'm here with Phil Vacchio.
Vacchio. So close. The CH is more common.
I knew that Italian, yeah.
You need a little more Italian in your life, yeah.
Vacchio.
Correct.
Right?
There you go.
Phil Vacchio. I knew I was going to mess it up.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's my shtick. I just do it on purpose.
That's right. Entertainment factor.
That's it. Phil's from Herzog Law.
Yes.
You guys do a lot of things. Estate planning.
Estate planning, elder law that's our niche, really.
Yeah.
Estate planning, elder law, probates administrations. We do some real estate also, but focus mostly on that area. And pretty niche. I mean, there's a huge need for it. Population continuing to grow. Mm-hmm. On the elder law side, people continuing to get older. That generation, baby boomer generation, is a huge generation of people. Transfers of wealth from that generation when they pass away. All that stuff is kind of interconnected in what we do, and it's helping the clients and their families. It's a transactional kind of law, for the most part, right? I'm not on LA Suits where I'm pretending to be a lawyer and litigating all these crazy scenarios. Not that I don't see a lot of crazy scenarios.
You're not screaming at people in the courtroom.
No, I don't. I try not to. Yeah, if I don't have to, or in the conference room, I'm screaming at my clients.
Yeah, probably not a great strategy.
I don't think so. I don't think they'd appreciate that.
What do you find yourself like in courtroom though?
Yeah. So not that I'm not in court. My court exposure is more limited to when people pass away, right? Probates and administration, handling things in courts, which I'll talk a little more about trying to avoid that situation for people later in the show, but oftentimes it's necessary. So I'll be in court for that. Sometimes those get contested, as you can imagine. Son and daughter fighting over the Christmas village and that kind of thing happens somewhat frequently. So the after death type stuff, we're in court for that frequently. And then guardianships. So whether it's for older individuals who have lost capacity and didn't plan properly with the appropriate documents, right? We might have to have them declared incompetent and have someone appointed to be their guardian to handle things for them. That's a court, that's a formal court hearing in New York Supreme Court. And also for kids who are disabled, right? So like intellectual disability, developmental disabilities, when those children turn 18, they're adults. Yeah. Despite the disability, their parents simply don't have the right to continue to make decisions and handle things for them, even though they're incapacitated, cannot do so themselves. So that's another type of guardianship. We'll go to, and that's usually in surrogate's court. We'll go to surrogate's court and get, that's called an Article 17A guardianship for someone who's developmentally or intellectually disabled. But that's pretty much my exposure to court.
To being in court,
yeah. And those matters are not, I handle plenty of them, but more my day-to-day stuff is more the transactional stuff, the planning side, asset protection side, applying for Medicaid for people. That's what I'm spending most of my time doing. Yeah. That's what I love doing. I don't mind court, but I'd rather be helping families navigate their issues, putting things in place for their future. There's a lot of appreciation in that area of law. Like you get to have a family with an issue come to me. We create a plan. We help the issue. They're very thankful, right? I'm not, litigating two partners over a contract dispute and everyone walks away pissed off. Yeah. Despite the result. So I find that to be really rewarding.
I was about to say a little bit more rewarding.
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah.
So, and I should say too, you guys are a community partner.
Yes.
And very grateful for that.
I'm very happy to be. Very excited.
Yeah.
Thank you. Together.
For everyone at our Herzog Law. Thank you. And you guys are just recently expanding.
Yeah.
So we should talk before we get, because I want to get into the estate stuff. And I'm actually, as I was getting ready for you to come on the show, I was like, how do you make estate law exciting? Right?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, well, no, that's what I have the benefit. Obviously, we're in a weekly group, Gold Star, in Saratoga Springs. So I get to hear about it pretty often and hear some of the stories that you tell. And it actually is really interesting. Some of the stories that you've told and the situations that arise. And I don't think that people I think they hear estate planning and they're like, oh yeah, I'll get around to it. Or, I'm not sure. I don't really have many assets. I don't think I really need that. Or I don't think people understand the full breadth of what it means.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's one of the easiest things to, put your head in the sand about. And I'll get back to that. I don't want to talk about those heavy topics with my kids, with my family. Just let's put it off one more day.
Yeah.
And 5 years later, we haven't done anything still. And I hear that every day. Like every time I meet with a client, they're like, we should have did this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but we didn't. And I say, well, whatever. No harm, no foul. You made it. Nothing happened.
Right.
We're okay. Let's get it in place now. But yeah, a lot of misconceptions about whether it's necessary, is it not necessary, different scenarios that I'll bring up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'd be a good idea to talk about the firm first, like you mentioned.
Yeah. So tell us about the firm.
Yeah. So Herzog Law Firm. The firm itself has been around for about 78 years. So a long time in the capital region, which is a testament to the quality of services they provided.
Yeah.
I've only been with them for about 2 years now.
Okay.
Right. A quick little Phil Vacchio 101.
Yes, please.
I was, if the listeners can't pick up on it already, and Mike, I'm from Long Island originally. Escaped about 4 years ago now. That flew. It's been 4 years already.
Was that a movie?
What? Escape from Long Island? Possibly.
Maybe. Or no, that was Escape from LA. Sorry. That was Snake Plissken with Kurt Russell. You ever see that movie?
No, wasn't that Escape from New York City?
I think there was two of them.
Or maybe there was two of them.
I think they did two of them because one of them did so well.
Stuck in an underground, Asian crime.
Yeah, something like
magical.
that. It was like one of my mom's favorite movies, which is weird. But...
Good old 80 flick.
Yeah, exactly. All right, sorry, little tangent.
So yeah, I moved up from Long Island about 4 years ago. My wife and I, now 3 kids, just wanted to change of pace, change of life. I was a partner at a firm down there doing the same type of law, estate planning, elder law, same stuff. I created a new branch of that firm up here in the capital region. And I was renting space from another firm that didn't do what we do and growing that practice up here. And about 2 years ago, or a little more than 2 years ago, I got approached at my now current partners at Herzog Law Firm. They had a need for somebody with my skill set. They were growing, right place, right time, decided to come on. And it was one of the best professional moves for me. It's been fantastic. Yeah. And again, high quality. I vetted them very closely, right? I don't want to get in partnership with people that I don't feel practice the same way I do, and they certainly do. So joined over there, and since then we've continued to grow exponentially, right? So we have our main office is in Albany, over in Corporate Woods. Our I would call second main office is in Saratoga Springs, over on Division and Railroad. We have a satellite office down in Kingston, New York, that we do a lot of work in, and then our newest area we're opening up is up in Queensbury, the 719 Bay Road in Queensbury, and nice. They're building that out currently. It's a new space in what's called Fowler Square that I think you're familiar with. So, a mix of high-end condos, and there's a small commercial area that we're going to build into our office. So we're actually seeing people there now, but we're using the leasing office temporarily to meet clients. And then once the space is built out, it'll be a nice, beautiful office, and going to be excited to see lots of people up there.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, so.
And do you guys all kind of rotate around through the different offices depending on where the clients are, or how does that, or do you have specific attorneys that work in each location, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, to a degree, right? So we have a scheduling coordinator that kind of figures it out for the most part, but like me personally, I'm usually Monday, Fridays in the Albany office, Wednesday, Thursdays in the Saratoga office, Tuesday I'm floating around depending on where the business is, and the other attorneys are similar. So we'll have days that are set that we're in a particular office, and they can schedule around that, but if the need arises, is an emergency situation, well, oftentimes we're meeting clients in nursing homes, in their home, in a facility if they can't come to the office, and we'll try to schedule the rest of our day around that. So we're not just wasting time traveling between offices. But yeah, so it's myself, Dave Kubicki, and Jay Marie Schaefer are the 3 partners that handle the estate planning and other law type matters. And then we have another partner, Dan Glasser, who does all our real estate law. Okay. Yeah.
I think I know that name, Dan Glasser.
You probably met him somewhere. You're everywhere, Mike. Who don't you know? Come on. You've met him somewhere.
I just had a lunch appointment actually with a client, and we were having that conversation because he's like, you seem to know everybody around town. And he's like, I don't know anybody. And I was like, yeah, it's just because I have a newspaper and I'm constantly harassing people for interviews, and they're probably like, oh, it's that Mike Nelson guy again. Jeez.
Yeah, look the other way. Here comes
run.
Mike. No.
So And you're a partner at
Yes.
Herzog.
Yeah.
And I'm always fascinated about how that works. Like, do all law firms kind of run the same structure as far as like you come on as an associate?
Associate initially, usually.
Yeah. And then you become junior partner. Like, how does that typically work for law firms?
It depends on the structure of the firm, the size of the firm, various factors, right? Like the larger firms that have like, nationwide 100 partners, that might be a longer track depending. You're an associate for a longer time. You show your worth, you bring work in, you bring revenue in, you go up the ranks.
Yeah.
I'm still somewhat young. I just happen to, again, some stuff, right place, right time. I like to externalize my accomplishments.
Sure.
Not take credit.
Yeah. It's not because you're hard work.
No, not at all.
No.
But I was a partner of the other firm. That happened somewhat young, and then when I moved up here, I was an associate first at Herzog. They can't make me partner right away. Got to feel me out, make sure I'm a right fit. But I became a partner after about a year there. So yeah, just joining the leadership table. You prove yourself, you prove your worth. Hopefully,
make yourself unfireable. I always like to say
that has been my mentality since I was a lifeguard at a local pool.
Yeah,
no matter what you do, make yourself invaluable.
Do you think? And I'm gonna just pull in some little fun facts here. Do you think that your wrestling background helped with that at all?
Yeah. Well, work ethic, right? So two things were the foundation for my work ethic. So one, my pops is an Italian immigrant. Came over when he was 14 or 15, I always forget. But
yeah.
Started working right away. I'm one of 9 kids, Irish American family, 9 kids. I don't know what my parents were thinking, but that's what the life they wanted to live. Hey, it's good for them. But he worked, 6-7 days a week. He was a commercial roofer in New York City, just worked his butt off.
Yeah,
and that's what he did. That's what was, what I saw was expected of a person providing for their family. So, I've been working since I was like 10 years old. Just doing various jobs. I worked with him some summers and winters, doing hard, manual labor, commercial roofing type stuff. And then wrestling. So high school wrestling. I was good. I was good at wrestling.
You could say it.
Came to me naturally, and I loved doing it. I did it year round. Went to some of the bigger summer camps that any wrestlers have heard of. Jay Robinson out in Minnesota. It was a month-long routine based off of the Army Ranger routine. The coach of Minnesota was an Army Ranger himself. Yeah. So super intense,
nasty
stuff. Mental deprivation, all that kind of stuff, and that just instills in you an ethic of hard work. Mm-hmm. And if you want something, you work for it, and you will achieve it if you want it bad enough and you put the work in. And I think that applies to every area of life, whether it's being a lawyer or construction worker, whatever you're doing,
or being a father.
It doesn't matter. Being a father.
Yeah.
Put the work in. Yeah.
Put the work in.
So, yes, I think that I do attribute a lot of my at least work ethic and who I've become from that experience, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to bring that. I mean, we do obviously have a couple of the jiu-jitsu people that listen to the podcast pretty regularly. So, we just like to fluff up the grappling community whenever we can.
Love the grappling community. I mean, I've mentioned to you, like my son's in Brazilian jiu-jitsu now. He's 7 years old, and I've joined. I haven't had much time to actually go, but it's one of those things like you miss that aspect of life, the competition, the training. So trying to get back into that too in my abundance of free time.
Yeah, and all the free time. I'd share it. I'm trying to get in for roles, and it's hard to get in there and train. But and now I've got it in my head I want to do some Muay Thai too, so I want to do some striking, and I keep saying I'm going to do that.
They have that at the place I go to also.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And you're at Eddie Fivey?
Eddie Fivey. We go mostly to the Malta one, but he has the Niskayuna location too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Niskayuna place too.
Man, there's so much jiu-jitsu around now.
It's crazy. It's become a huge thing. I mean, it's always been big, but I feel like nowadays it's bigger than it's ever been.
It's huge, yeah. And every time I talk about jiu-jitsu, I have to shout out to Chad Beatty because he's like the OG, like all jiu-jitsu in the area somehow came out of Chad.
I met him early on when I first moved up here through an attorney, Tony Iannello, who you know. And because they wanted me to write some articles for Saratoga Today. Yeah. So I wrote some articles. I met Chad, and he had explained to me that Eddie bought the gym.
Yeah, it used to be Spa City Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And Chad was legit like 30 years ago. He was the only guy up here. It was like that. He was telling me stories about it. It was like him and like 4 other guys that would like roll in a guy's basement and do jiu-jitsu. And then he'd like go down to New York City and train with, I don't know if it was It was one of the Gracies. Maybe it was
one of the 1,000 Gracie
families.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's really big on lineage, and he's really and he is. I mean, almost all jiu-jitsu in the area, and you can possibly not all, but almost all jiu-jitsu in the area came out of Chad Beatty in some form of.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really
and
crazy.
how underground it was at that time. Right?
Yeah,
rolling around someone's basement.
5 guys doing
a couple
jiu-jitsu.
dudes just hanging out.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy.
Lots changed since then.
That's
Yeah.
All right, so back to lawyering.
It's lawyering, estate planning. Right. Why are we here?
I know, right? So, one of the things now, again, and I know that you'll share a couple of stories, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting about estate planning is, as we said, most people dismiss it.
Yeah.
Even though, from what I've heard so far from you, everybody needs it.
Every adult person does.
Yeah, every adult person. Even if you only have a little bit of assets, you should still have certain things set up. And the fact that we live in a country that it's so complicated.
Yeah.
Like the rules around what happens when you die and what happens to you, your things, your assets, the people you care. Like, it's crazy of how
it can get very crazy.
Yeah.
State specific, if you have properties in multiple states, one state might not have jurisdiction of the property in the other state. And now your family's in court in 5 different states, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, planning properly, you figuring all that stuff out while you're alive, putting a little extra work in now for yourself is going to pay dividends to your family down the road in terms of simplifying things, reducing costs, reducing stress. It's so important. And you mentioned everyone needs an estate plan. I hear all the time, I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too poor, I have too much money to protect assets. I hear everything and everything in between that as well. I do power of attorney and healthcare proxies for 18-year-olds, right? So you're a parent, Mike.
Yep.
Child's going away to college. Maybe that child does a sport or whatever that child does. If that child gets hurt while they're away, can you call the school or the nurse or whoever they're with and get information? I'm her dad. I'm his dad. What happened? They need to talk to the insurance company. They're not going to speak to you after they're 18 years old. They're an adult. So I'll do power of attorney healthcare proxies for young kids who are 18, well, adults now who are 18, 19 years old, just in case something happens, their mom, their dad, whoever has the authority to speak to someone to handle things for them. Telling an 18-year-old, hey, sign this document, giving mom or dad permission to handle stuff for you again. Sometimes it's like, whoa, I just got my freedom here.
Got my independence.
What are you talking about? But when you explain it, we can make the document limited in scope. They have the authority to revoke it as soon as you get back from college or you get married, you want to change it to somebody else. Don't worry about it. We can do all those things. You're not giving up your freedom, but we're planning for worst case scenario if something happens to you, right? So that's like the first part of life where maybe some of these documents make sense. And then obviously you start to get older, you graduate college. The most common time of life that I have clients come in to do some kind of plan is when they have their first kids, usually, right? Because all of a sudden you are responsible for the life of another human being. Mm-hmm. And if I have kids and something happens for me, my wife and I, and my kids are under 18, one, who's taking custody of them?
Yeah.
I mentioned I'm one of 9 kids. Out of those 9 kids, some I would not want to have my kids. Some I would be okay with, right? I want to decide who that's going to be. I don't want them to fight over, oh, Phil would have wanted me. Mm-hmm. So in a valid will, we can specify who would be the guardian, who would take custody until they're 18. I don't want an 18-year-old inheriting a bunch of money. What would you do at 18 if you just got
oh my God,
a truckload of money or whatever it may be?
Spend it in a week.
All good decisions, right? You'd invest it wisely and let it grow for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So oftentimes, you're not financially mature yet at 18. So we would hate to have an 18-year-old get control of money. In a will, in other documents like a trust, we can put limitations, right? So we can say, and I'm just going to use random arbitrary ages and numbers to illustrate it. If I pass away and any of my kids are inheriting, or even if it's grandkids and they're under the age of, let's say, 25, that child share doesn't go to him, her outright, right? It gets held in a further trust account for their benefit. They don't get control until they turn 25. Until they turn 25, I'm going to put my brother Eric as the trustee. He's going to manage it for them. If they need money for school, for health, for support, they go to Uncle Eric. This is what I need money for. Uncle Eric says yes. Uncle Eric, I want to buy a Ferrari. Uncle Eric says no. It's the idea. We're setting parameters. We're putting people in control that we trust. And then hopefully when that child turns 25 or whatever age you pick, he or she's mature enough to then take control. Right? I mean, you can't plan for every situation. We don't know how they're all going to turn out, but there's certain things we can account for, use statistics, whatnot, to plan for that kind of stuff. So that's a very common time of life to get some documents in order. Usually for someone like that, whether it's an individual or a couple, what I call the basic estate plan, a foundation estate plan, is going to be sufficient normally. That consists of a will, what's actually known as a last will and testament, a power of attorney, and a healthcare proxy. So the will says when I die, who's in charge, where does my stuff go? That's where I can name the guardians, I can name the trustees and the ages, all that stuff I just discussed goes in my last will and testament. Power of attorney, healthcare proxy is while I'm alive. So those two documents are only valid while I'm living. Once I pass away, they're null and void. But they're really for the purpose, if I become incapacitated and can't handle my medical or non-medical matters, who has the legal authority to step in and handle those matters for me? Even if you're married, just because you're married, that marriage certificate doesn't necessarily give my wife the authority to go manage my IRAs or talk to my insurance companies. She would still need to be my primary power of attorney to be able to handle those things for me. And
a lot of people think that, yeah.
Oh, I would say the majority of people do. We're married. What do you mean? Anything that's his is mine. Mine is, we can handle anything, and it's just simply not true. So even if you are married, you want to have that spouse as your primary person. If you want that, not that you have to have your spouse as your primary. That's not always the case. I've seen everything. But yes, you should still have that person as the primary, and then backups across the board. When you're planning, you are planning based on the information that's in front of you right now, but you want to make these documents as future-proof as possible. And I always say to my clients during a consult, it's my job to be Mr. Morbid, Mr. Worst Case Scenario. I'm going to bring you down a deep, dark rabbit hole with me that you've never gotten down before, but we're going to go down it together now. We're going to think about it. We're going to make decisions. We're going to put it in place, and then guess what? Then you don't have to think about it anymore. We want to account for as much as we can. If that person passes away, who's the backup? Even a second-level backup. If these are my beneficiaries, one of them passes away, is their share going to their kids? Is it going somewhere else? So backups for everything is advisable.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me until recently. You were telling a story at Gold Star actually, and I'm trying to remember the specific story, but what I heard was there's so many different eventualities that can happen, so many possibilities of what can take place, that the purpose of a lot of this is to try to cover as many bases as you can think of so that there's a plan, so that, like you said, you don't have to think about it. And there's probably not a document that will cover every single, potential outcome. But, the idea behind having someone like yourself that's doing it and does it every day, you have seen a lot of different circumstances, and it gives you the ability to formulate a better plan.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of using an experienced attorney in this area. You can go online and go to Rocket Lawyer or some other sites and pay us a couple $100. We'll print you out a New York State power of attorney, healthcare proxy, a will, and you fill in the blanks, and you're going to be set. But those documents are not going to account for all those situations you mentioned, right? The computer's not asking you, hey, where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? What's your plan? What are your goals? Are your kids disabled? This and that. We're going to have a full discussion during a consult. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about yourself to get to know you, your situation, your goals. And your documents should be specifically tailored to reflect all that. It's not a fill in the blank. A lot of people think it is. It's easy. Anyone can do it. I just fill in a few blanks and,
ChatGPT might be a bad solution for...
Right now, I don't know, in 10 years, am I going to be out of work? But according to Bill Gates, I may be.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It's nuts.
It is nuts. So using professional, obviously, there's some weight to that.
So advisable. I mean, even just the signing of the documents, there's formalities. And if it's not closely followed, that document that you thought was valid might be invalid. Or maybe the way it's drafted or the way you executed it doesn't actually accomplish what you thought it would. Power of attorney document is a great example of that. Power of attorney in New York is quite complicated. And if you ever look at the document, there is a New York State, what they call short form, that you could print out. But even the short form, when you look at it, there's a bunch of different sections and they're optional. Do I initial here? Do I not initial here? And if someone's not explaining to you really what those sections mean and how they could be used in certain situations, you might be like, I don't need that. That's never going to apply to me. And then guess what? You don't initial it, and 20 years down the road, it does apply to you. And now your kids are, their options are much more limited than they would have been if you didn't initial that section. And then also in the power of attorney, there's this area called modification section. So there's the short form, it's statutory, New York State, it's the same across the board, the language. But there's this modification section that allows us as attorneys to input all these other powers that we see quite frequently and that we use quite frequently for our clients in different situations. So that section is tailored specifically by the law office based on the person's situation. And again, there's options in there. And one of the biggest things, especially as you're aging and we start to think about, hey, if I got sick one day, and we've heard horror stories of someone going into a nursing home and losing all of our assets. Nursing homes are right now about $18,000 a month, which is astronomical. You think about how quickly all your hard-earned assets would go out the window. So if I have a power of attorney and that power of attorney has what we refer to as gifting powers, and if me and you met for the first time, Mike, and I said, hey, do you want to give your power of attorney the power to gift? What would you think when I say that? A gift. What's a gift?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is no, I don't, because they're going to gift all the stuff away. But also at the same time, just having listened to you before, it sounds like that might be something that could be used to protect assets that, say, a nursing home could take away.
That's exactly right. Because a gift, legally speaking, is any kind of uncompensated transfers. It's not just gifts for birthdays and holidays. It's any movement of assets out of my name to another person, another entity. A lot of times we'll create different kinds of trusts to preserve assets. Transfers to those trusts, legally speaking, are gifts. And if I have a power of attorney that does not have that broad of a scope of power for my acting agent, their ability to protect assets if I become incompetent and need long-term care are going to be close to null. So those powers become incredibly important, even more so as we age. A lot of my younger couples, when we're meeting the first time, we just had kids, maybe that power at that time is not necessary, right? The likelihood of me going into a nursing home, barring a tragic accident, is very low. But the older you get, the greater those possibilities become, and that's when we start to think about it. And there's no red line number, but for most of my clients, I use the range of 60 to 70 or so, depending on health and illnesses and whatnot. But 60 or 70 or so as a rule of thumb when we start to talk about also asset protection planning. And sometimes that's when we have that power of attorney discussion. Hey, you did this power of attorney 20 years ago. Did you know you didn't give these powers, and these are what these powers can be used for? We should maybe do a new one, broadening the scope of those powers. That's a good time.
So these are documents that it's not a one and done. You should review them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how often should you review that stuff?
Rule of thumb, again, every 5 years, I say at least review them. Right. So our firm and some other firms give free consultations. So I tell clients when they leave, question pops up, situation changes. Don't be scared to call me. You're not going to get hit with a bill. I want to discuss with you, because of those changes in life, is there a need to adjust your documents? Going back to earlier, when I said we try to make those documents as future-proof as possible, I do try to account for a lot, so I'm not having to redo your stuff all the time. But some stuff we can't plan for, and that may make it necessary to change those documents. But every 5 years or so, if we don't hear from you, we'll reach out. That's our rule of thumb from our firm. But again, no bright line rule. Major life changes, a death in the family, death of a spouse, I hit the lotto, I sell a business, windfall of money comes in. Those are all good reasons to at least review your estate plan and see, do changes have to be made? Because sometimes they do. It's not a static document. They should change with you.
Do you have, I don't know what the rules are, so if you can't share, you obviously don't have to.
Trade secrets? What do you mean?
Well, no, yeah. No, I'm just wondering, do you have like an example of where having either, or let's say power of attorney.
Yeah.
Not an overall estate plan yet, but let's say power of attorney. Like, do you have a story of when someone had it like save their bacon that you can share? Are you able to share that stuff? I know. I figured you had a lot of them.
Let's think of a recent one, right? So a couple of weeks ago, I met with a client, and this is not a happy one. This is a negative one, right? So the client, I believe it was either the son or the daughter who came to me, and mom or dad was in a hospital having to go into a nursing home. Very common scenario. Mom or dad had done estate planning. That wasn't with our firm, but they had, will, power of attorney, healthcare proxy in place, the basic type stuff that everyone should have. and was now incompetent, meaning that if we wanted to change those documents, we no longer can because the person isn't competent enough to sign new versions. So we were stuck with what they had done in the past, and they came to me and they said, hey, this is a scenario. Dad still has, $200,000 or so in these financial accounts, brokerage accounts and bank accounts, etc. Is going into a nursing home where we're told it's $18,000 a month. It's crazy. He worked really hard for those assets. What can we do here to protect some of that? And first question I asked, can I see the power of attorney that he prepared? I took a look at it. Lo and behold, that gifting power, not initial, those modifications, blank, right? So that power of attorney is bare bones power of attorney. They can pay bills on his behalf. They can sign applications for government benefits. They can deal with insurance companies. What they can't do is move money. And there was no loopholes here. I won't get into the loopholes too much, but there was no loopholes here to take advantage of. And I said, unfortunately, there's not much we could do here. If this power of attorney was broader and we had those gifting powers, we could have I call that, financially speaking, the worst case scenario, because there's a 5-year look back for nursing home care if we want Medicaid to pay. Right? So if we say, hey, this person's going into a nursing home, we're going to apply for Medicaid to pay for that nursing home. The application process involves looking back 5 years over every financial transaction that person has made. So we can't just now give everything away to protect it, because they would say, hey, those transfers within the past 5 years, it's going to make him Medicaid ineligible. But even in that example, I can use a technique that we call crisis planning, where we do a series of gifts and loans, right? So in that scenario, I would have the son or daughter open an account in his or her name as what I call a holding account. And we would apply these complicated formulas, and we would transfer assets in a series of gifts and loans from dad's accounts to this account now in the son's name. And at the end of the day, I would have been able to protect at least half of that money. That option is not available because that power of attorney was too limited in scope. So I had to be the bearer of bad news there. Hey, we could have did this. Unfortunately, in their dad's situation, we can't do this.
So in that situation, basically, the nursing home's going to drain those accounts dry.
Yeah,
then Medicaid's going to pick up the bill. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so they're going to have to privately pay. I mean, maybe there's some things that they can spend the money down on, right? We can do things like prepay for someone's funeral. That's an allowable expense. So look at some of that stuff. How can we spend this money on other stuff that's necessary? But ultimately, after all that, he's going to have to continue to pay the nursing home bill till the funds are below the appropriate Medicaid limit. So the Medicaid limit right now is about $32,000 for a person. So they're going to get down to $32,000 before they can apply.
I don't think anyone thinks to themselves, I'm going to sock all this money away so the nursing home can have it.
Yeah, right. I'm going to work really hard and make sacrifices to give it all to the nursing home.
Give it
That's
to
my
the nursing
plan.
home. Nothing against you nursing homes out there. I'm sure you're doing great work.
Everyone's got to make a living, but, let's have the government pay.
Yeah.
Wow,
that is crazy. And again, fascinating that you have these. I just think that stuff's always kind of cool where you have like these, I don't want to say tricky, but it's like sophisticated ways of being able to do things so that you can protect the assets.
Legal loopholes, right? Some people say, well, are you telling me to do something that's not legal? I say, well, I'm going to risk my law degree to tell you that. What we're doing is legal. Medicaid has these rules. If we navigate those rules appropriately, we could protect some of the assets. And that was, what I mentioned there, worst case scenario. Or even if they had the power of attorney, we could protect about half the assets. Let's go back in time for that person, 5-10 years, and say we had met and we discussed creating what we call a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust on the flip side, right? That is a vehicle, right? A trust is basically a document with a set of rules that we create, and it becomes its entity, and that entity can own assets the same as you or I as individuals can. And we're gonna put some of that person's assets in this trust. Again, very personal, specific to the person, because there are certain limitations on what we can do with the assets we put into the trust. So we want to balance protecting assets versus still living our lives. But we go through that whole conversation. We stick a bunch of assets. Maybe that person owned a family home, or maybe they owned a family camp that they want to keep in the family. Stick it in this trust. If it's in there for at least 5 years before, if it's a individual or if it's a husband and wife or spouse and spouse, before either needs nursing home care, guess what? Those assets are free and clear, totally protected 100%. And it's going to one day go to your heirs, whoever you want that to be. So advanced planning is even better. We can protect more of the assets, and then whatever we leave in the person's name to live off of, that's where we use that crisis plan for to protect about half of that on top of everything else. So advanced planning is incredibly important, right?
And when you say advanced planning, what you're saying is the younger you get in there and get a plan together and then revisit that plan on a pretty frequent basis, that's advanced planning, not instead of
not crisis planning. Not I'm sick.
The situation just happened and now I've got to take action.
Yeah, be proactive, not reactive in that sense.
Yeah,
for sure. And revisiting the plan. Like I said, you might not be comfortable with certain aspects or doing this kind of a trust when you're in your 30s, 40s, but then you're 50 or 60, you're retiring. Mm-hmm. The idea of it might be more appealing to you. A lot of times we'll meet clients who went through something with their parents, good or bad, right? So meaning that maybe their parents failed to plan properly and they see the negative of it and they're like, oh man, I don't want my family to ever go through that. What do I have to do to avoid that? Or mom or dad planned perfectly and they see the benefit of it. Oh my God, but what they did, we protected all these assets. When they passed away, we didn't have to go to court. I want the same for my family. So that's learning from experience. And that's, unfortunately, sometimes the best way to learn, not that you want to learn with the negative experiences, but it's an eye opener for a lot of people because when you're living your life, you're busy taking care of your kids, you have your own, you're running your business or working hard. You're not thinking about this stuff every day, nor should you. It's pretty depressing to think about this stuff every day.
I like to learn lessons the hard way.
Do you?
I do.
That's your thing?
3 or 4 times. Yeah. I really like to make sure that lesson sinks in. Unfortunately, I guess I probably can't go into, can't die 3 or 4 times to.
No, yeah, that's a one-time thing, I think.
That's what I heard.
For now.
The word on the street is,
Yeah.
So we've got, I want to make sure I've got the pieces here. We've got power of attorney.
Yeah.
We've got, and now, let me back up. I'm interrupting myself. When you say estate plan, like this is a whole encompassing term of a bunch of pieces, right? So power of attorney.
Healthcare proxy. A will. Having maybe a trust for different purposes. One of those purposes is protecting assets.
You say maybe a trust. I feel like I left Gold Star one day after you doing a commercial on trust, thinking that like everybody on the planet needs a trust of some sort.
It's when you're very young, it's a risk-benefit analysis, right? Because trusts are a little bit more expensive than your basic doing a will, power of attorney, healthcare proxy. Probably not as expensive as most people think, but more expensive. And, when you're young and you just had kids, is it very likely that you and your spouse are going to both pass away in a common accident? No. I mean, it's not, obviously, anything is possible, so I don't want to say no, but when we're doing a risk-benefit analysis, does it make sense to create a trust at that time? Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes it does, right? Say that young couple, one of them owns a business. And if that person died and we had to go through probate, a formal court proceeding, before someone could take over the business, that's going to have business interruption. That could affect the workflow. That could affect revenue. So
as you're saying that, I was like, well, I own a business.
You do. I'm talking directly to you.
Directly to me. I know. I'm like, I don't have a power of attorney. I don't have any of that stuff, to be fair.
And in your defense, it's not uncommon. Unfortunately,
I'm rethinking my strategy as you speak here, Phil. What the hell am I doing?
Yeah, well, wake up call.
I know. Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna make another appointment, I guess.
But yeah, I've seen that. I've been involved in helping families with too many untimely deaths. Right. So they're a reality. Anyone who watches the news knows that to be true. And when I have no estate plan at all, that's the worst case scenario. Now all of a sudden, let me ask you, if I was to tell you, or I was to ask you, and you might already know this because you've listened to me, but maybe not, I don't know. You have a spouse and you have children. Mm-hmm. Let's say you don't have a will. You pass away. Mm-hmm. Some of the assets are in just Mike Nelson's name, whether it's on just the house is in my name or I have certain accounts that are just in my name. You pass away, right? No will, survived by a spouse and kids. Everything goes to your wife automatically, right?
That's what I would assume.
That's what you would assume. Yeah. So most people would assume. That's not the case. So let's say that the house, let's use the house as an example because that's a good one. And this has happened to me before. All of a sudden, you pass away, the house isn't just your name. Your wife would get the first $50,000 of the value of the house and then half of the remainder of the value. And your kids would inherit the other half. Now, if you have a minor child like you do, now you have a minor child who is a owner of your house. So if we want to change that, and we want your wife to own it, your wife's going to have to buy them out, maybe refinance it. There's going to be a guardian ad litem appointed by the court to look over that child's interest because he or she doesn't have, the capacity to make their own decisions. They're not an adult. That could be really messy. So even a basic will in that example would have helped, because most likely you would say everything goes to my spouse, or that at least the house goes to my spouse first, whatever the case is. We would avoid that situation. So stories like that happen every day, and it gets more complicated the more stuff you have, the more complicated your situation is. Owning a business, right? I have an LLC or an S corp. Who has the right to continue operating that, or even just to wind it down and collect the outstanding payments and whatnot?
I was actually thinking about that the other day. I'm like, what would happen if I got hit by a bus or something? Like, who is gonna do payroll, and what's gonna happen to the money in the accounts? And
those are valid concerns.
My employees, like, my first thought's to my employees, and then my second thought is to the work that we have already gotten paid to do for, like, how does it all shake out?
Right. Who finishes those jobs? All the above.
And then if no one does, obviously problems arise. Who deals with those problems, and who's the onus on for the financial liability or the legal liability?
Sure. And that could result in debts against your estate, which means less goes to your family. A lot of times,
I'm broke, Phil.
Nothing there. Okay, that's fair enough.
They're not getting anything. They might owe money, actually.
But in a situation like that, so I say I own a business. Let's just use an LLC as an example. Common business ownership entity. In a situation like that, I would advise the client to consider what we call a revocable trust. So a revocable trust is an entity I form. I can be the trustee. So while I'm alive, it's mostly a formality. I'm the trustee. I'm the sole beneficiary. So all my rights to any assets the revocable trust owns are the same as if I was the individual owner. It has no negative tax consequence. If I want to sell the business, buy another business, whatever the case is, I can do all those things. But we make the trust the owner of the corporate entity. So we assign the corporate entity to that trust. Again, you're the primary trustee. As long as you're alive and well, you're doing your thing. Nothing changes. But we're going to have a backup trustee, and we're also going to have a distribution structure of trust-owned assets. The day you pass away, something happened to you, that backup trustee could take over immediately and continue running the business, collecting the payables, winding it down if necessary. If it was not in place, and if you have just a will, or if you don't have a will, they're going to have to go through a formal court proceeding called probate, which that full process takes at least a year in New York. And the person who's named as your executor or whatnot likely can't start acting until a few months, because the court has to process paperwork and whatnot before they're officially appointed as the executor. So that could be a huge delay in a business. Just a few months.
Huge delay.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
and it's New York, so.
And it's New York.
I think you're being generous with the
Probably. Depends on the county, but But those are considerations we look at. So when I say that, you said, shouldn't everybody have a trust? Not necessarily, but there are many, many situations where, trust would make a lot of sense. You have never been through probate yourself, right? For a loved one?
I have never known, luckily.
Most people don't enjoy the experience, those who have been through it, because it's a formal court proceeding. And there's expenses, it takes time, there's delays, there's paperwork, and it's fairly easy to avoid for the most part, right? Financial accounts, if I have beneficiaries on those or joint owners and I die, that goes to those people automatically. That's outside of probate. My will, that doesn't control that. That's all automatic. Real estate's a bit different. That's a lot of times we're putting real estate or businesses into these trusts to avoid probate for those. But a lot of times that is preferable for somebody when I talk to them about, hey, this is what probate is. Do you want your family to go through it, or do you want to do a little more work now, spend a little bit more money now to avoid it? And a lot of times the answer is, why wouldn't I want to avoid that?
Right.
So again, specific to the person, I'm not going to say that everyone needs a trust. That's simply not true, but it is a very useful tool we use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of these things sound like very useful tools about things that you never would think about in a million years.
And that's one of my favorite parts of being an attorney in this area of law is it's such practical information that everybody needs, right? It's not obscure maritime law and stuff like that. Like I talk to anybody and I have information that could be useful to them.
Yeah.
And that's nice.
I know that we're getting short on time, but I one of the questions I had as you were talking is, what do people that are like, let's just say it's just Mike. I got no kids, no living family. I own a business. I have assets.
Yeah.
Like what do those people do?
That's a great question. I'm going to give you an extreme. You're welcome, Mike. Because I'm going to give you probably my most extreme example of a scenario like that, right? So this is back when I was practicing on Long Island. A woman came to me and said, my best friend just died. And she had a will. the will said everything that the deceased person owns goes to her best friend. She had no family to speak of. Mm-hmm. Parents were deceased, never married, no kids, no siblings even. So the will said everything goes to my best friend, and my best friend's the executor. And the friend assumed, hey, she had that will. I'm just going to bring it to the bank and sell the house and do what I got to do. So in that scenario, we have to go through probate, right? So before she can start acting as the executor, she has to have that will probated by the court, and she has to be formally appointed. But guess what? One of the first steps for the court to accept the will and appoint her is that we have to find the class of closest living heirs that would inherit if a will didn't exist. So if a will doesn't exist in New York, there's something called the law of intestacy. And that says when there's no will, these are the people who would inherit. And it goes to find the class of closest living heirs. So if I have a spouse and kids, it's my spouse and kids. If I don't have a spouse or kids, it's my parents. If I don't have parents, it's my siblings or the children of predeceased siblings. So as you can see, it keeps getting broader and broader in scope. So in this example, this woman's closest living relatives were first cousins once removed. If I remember correctly, she had about 25 of them. They were located in England, Thailand, Italy, Spain, like literally all over the world. When I asked the friend who's the executor and the beneficiary of the will, who was your closest living family, she's like, she had no family. Mm-hmm. She's like, I have no idea. I couldn't even begin to tell you. So we had to hire a private investigator. We had to hire a genealogist. This whole process took, I think, like 2 years to even locate everybody. Then we had to send them notices to sign waivers saying they're not contesting. Some of them wouldn't sign waivers. So when all is said and done, 3 to 4 years in, and, a couple $100,000 in fees and whatnot later between all this stuff, we finally get the person appointed as the executor. And there was like nothing left to even distribute at that point.
That's terrible.
How awful is that? And you'd think in that woman's mind, when she did the will, she's probably like, I'm doing the right thing by my friend. She's the closest person to me. She's going to get what I have when I die. Not realizing she just put her friend into a nightmare scenario that she really didn't even benefit from much.
And the system just chewed it all up.
Chewed it up. And, those laws are there for good purpose, right? So as you can imagine, surprise, surprise, people take advantage of other people as they get older. So if my mom or my dad was older and they met a, person who was younger who decided to take advantage of them, and they all of a sudden they did a new will, I do want to have a chance to contest that because maybe they were taken advantage of. Yeah. And that's why the law is the way it is. And it has it right. But oftentimes it's more of an inconvenience because people don't realize, hey, like I don't even know who my first cousins once removed are, if you ask me.
Yeah, in that scenario, she probably never even knew those people existed.
I don't think any of them knew who they were even receiving a notice about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Wild.
That's a very extreme example, but it's a good illustration of how it could get really messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is... Plan. Advanced planning.
Plan now. Adjust as you go. Very important.
Sounds important.
Yeah. You want to schedule your consult now, Mike?
Yeah, no, get the calendar out. If people want to learn more about you, about Herzog, about the work that you do, where can they find you guys?
So we have a great website, herzoglaw.com. You can call in for free consultations, so free hour consults. If you come, even if it's a learning experience, take advantage of it. Phone number is 518-465-7581. Come into any of our offices. We have 4 offices, like I mentioned. We could do a Zoom call. We could do a phone call. Whatever's convenient for you. We try to make ourselves accessible. So, yeah.
Let me also just commend you on knowing your phone number.
I'm lucky. So we do a radio show Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Magic, 105.1, I think.
Okay.
But I have to say it during the radio show, so I have some practice.
All right.
Yeah, a little bit of practice.
I don't even know my kids' phone numbers right now.
Well, that I couldn't tell you. No.
Yeah.
No.
I know my wife's.
Yeah. I know maybe 3 phone numbers.
Yeah.
That's about it.
I can tell you all the phone numbers from when I was growing up. I think I know like still some of my friends' phone numbers from growing up that I used to call all the time. In your mind. Yeah. Phil, thanks again for coming on. Appreciate you coming out to the farm. Always a much better experience than Zoom. So thank you very much. And
happy to be here.
Thank you and the team for being a community partner and helping buying local happen.
Absolutely. Looking together, working for a long time together.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Of course, you can find us on the new rebranded website of buyinglocal.us. I know that you used to be able to find us on glensfallsreport.com and saratogabusinessreport.com. If you're not in the know, we've recently brought it all under one banner so we can distribute and increase our exposure in Warren, Washington, and Saratoga counties, the place that we call home. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and you'll hear from us next week.